Good morning, everybody. It's 7 a.m. here in the Seattle area. It's still dark outside, so bear with me. Today, we're going to talk just in general about, CNAs creating CVEs and putting them out there for the world to see. I have been doing this job for 11 years now, and I've developed rather thick skin because people talk a lot about my CVEs in various ways, good or bad, lots of good. But one thing is we've been trying to make them better. That's always the goal, is to make the information better, more thorough, and more actionable. This year has been kind of surprising for me and for the industry, I think, because a number of things have happened, and those things that have happened have sort of put a lot of more responsibility on the CNAs to make the CVE program successful. And so a few things that have happened. One is that there's a new Secure by Design pledge that was put out by CISA. A number of companies, not all of which are CNAs, have signed the pledge, and not all CNAs have signed the pledge. So it's a mix of a number of different companies in our industry. And basically, the pledge talks about a lot of things. But for me and my focus on the pledge, Microsoft has signed it, by the way, is to, make your CVEs in CVE.org as high quality as possible, including CWEs. And the pledge does mention CPEs and CVSS. And so we have started enhancing our records, and the CVE program has been charging all the CNAs in the program to enrich their data. Secondly, so that's another factor that's causing us to take a look at our data quality. The third is the big elephant in the room, and that NVD is sort of been struggling this year, and is behind on enriching the data. And so it's kind of up to us to step in there where we can to help the situation. CISA started this vulnerable enrichment program. And as you heard yesterday, we have now stood up the ADP program. And so the vulnerable enrichment data that CISA is adding, if and only if the CNAs have not enriched their data, is that same information, CWE, CPE, CVSS, and they also add KEV data. And that data goes right into the CVE record on CVE.org. And so it's CVE.org, as opposed to being in the past, a lot of people, a lot of companies around the world, a lot of consumers of CVE information went through NVD to get that data. I think what we need to do now is let the world know about CVE.org and convince not only just companies and consumers of CVEs, but governments around the world that it's a better one-stop shop for getting the CVE information. And so that's kind of a new story. We tried to tell that story in the 25th anniversary document that Kent went through yesterday. But it's a story that we're going to continue to have to tell, because people are a little bit confused, because NVD was the source of the data. And I'm not saying that NVD is dead, or it's never going to come back, or we're never going to hear from them again. That's not the case. But the situation is that CVE.org has a better set of data now. And so we need to keep working on that. And so the message is that we, the CNAs of this world, really can own our own message. We can set our own scores. We can set our own CWEs and really tell the message about our vulnerabilities to the world in a way that we can represent in a very fair way. And so that's what I think we all need to start taking it seriously. Well, not that we haven't taken it seriously. I've always taken it seriously, but we need to do what we can to make the data better. And so I'll talk a little bit about our journey with CVSS scoring, which we started scoring the CVEs fairly recently. In 2016, we started scoring CVSS, and it took us a while. As probably you guys know too, we have a number of people on our team. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but in this business, there is a big turnover of people that take the cases, analyze the vulnerabilities, assess their impact, and try to put the information associated with the vulnerabilities out to the world. And so there is some skill in learning how to score vulnerabilities correctly. But we also pay attention, to Twitter and to if what we found is that if we score something badly or we give it a bad CWE value, there's a lot of people out there quick to point it out on Twitter. We do pay attention to it. We look at those tweets. We decide whether they're right or wrong, and we're not afraid of changing the data if we got it wrong. But I think the industry is good at keeping each other honest. And so I encourage everybody to pay attention to what people are saying, and be open to changing not only how you're doing CVEs on a large scale, but individual CVEs. It's not always easy to get it right. That's fine. And Alec talked about this yesterday. The root cause mapping working group is a fairly new group that's run by MITRE and CISA jointly, I think. And there's a lot of good discussions about how to find the right CWE and how to go about and talking together as industry players to understand how CWE can help the industry. I mean, bottom line for me is that we're really trying to make our industry safer for the world, because I don't know how long you all have been in the industry. I've been in it for a long time myself. And it used to be that, we knew about security, but we didn't take it all that seriously because there weren't a lot of bad guys doing a lot of bad things. But that world has changed significantly. And it's up to us, the people that are working on software and products, to make it safer. And CVEs and CWEs and CVSSs are all part of that journey. And the better that we can do, I think the safer our industry can get. And I think that's what we're trying to do. That's really what we're trying to do here. And so consider joining the working group on root cause mapping if you're interested in trying to get CWEs to be more precise and more accurate. Also, I know the courses on first.org, the CVSS courses, are very, very good. It's a very good place to start if you're just getting started. Learning how to score, it takes a lot of practice. And so I started by taking the 3.1 course on first.org, and it was great. It was very useful. So this is another thing that we do in our as we're working our way up towards Patch Tuesday. As maybe we usually publish between 80 and 100 or sometimes more CVEs on any given Patch Tuesday. They're usually 4 weeks apart. And so it's a huge amount of work that we do in that 4 weeks. I'll tell you, on the day of Patch Tuesday, we get it out the door at 10 o'clock and we start working on the next release as soon as we get it out the door. So it's a bunch of work to get these CVEs out. But this set of questions, I wrote a PowerShell script that I run against our API. We have a preview API. I run this and I take a look at the titles and the impacts and the scores for all the CVEs that we do, and I spit out these questions, which kind of tells the folks that are working on the CVEs what kind of things you need to explain to yourself, if not to your customers. We actually put FAQs onto the CVEs to kind of explain why we did what we did in terms of usually the score. So anyway, this was sort of a homegrown list of questions. I think it helps us be a better scores, and it helps, explain to our customers what we're doing. But there's some weird combinations, and I'm not saying that this is a perfect list of questions or, the final list of questions. We added to it over time, and I'm sure we could add some more. And I'd love to hear everybody's opinions on these questions. But if you have something that you're calling a remote code execution, but the attack vector is local, well, that can confuse people, and it confuses good scores. I've talked to a lot of very smart people about, there's a light in my office that goes off if I don't wave my arms. So the light just turned off. Sorry about that. Here, I'll go turn it back. Anyway, so if you notice weird things in scores that might be useful to explain, you should go through a process of asking yourself the question. We put it out on the CVE and talk about them publicly, but you don't even have to do that. But if you ask yourself a series of questions about some weird scores, it can help and to get it right. The other thing is we do a lot of group scoring. So people take a crack at scoring, and then we get in small groups and talk about it. And oftentimes you can catch mistakes that way. So security really is a group sport, and we try to do that here. So at this point, Tom, I wanted to take a poll. Maybe some of you guys know David Sommerfeld. He's on the CVSS SIG and works for Microsoft and MSRC. And so we're finding it interesting that certainly some people are moving to CVS 4.0. We haven't yet. We're still studying it, but we're interested in finding out how many other people really are committed to moving to 4.0. So I wanted to hold up this little poll that everybody can take. And I'm going to share this information with the CVSS SIG. Also, the SIG is holding a survey that's kind of asking the same thing. Excuse me. So if you want to, you can go take the SIG survey as well. It says host and panelists cannot vote. So I can't vote, so I hope you guys are all voting. Tom, is the poll open?
Poll is open. We have 40 folks who have answered so far.
Okay. So can we keep the poll open during the rest of the meeting? We could just let people vote when they want.
Sure, absolutely.
Great. So I'm curious if anybody wants to raise their hand and talk at all about their journey with 4.0. I can't find the Zoom call. No, that's not what I wanted to show. Anyway, we can go on, but let's talk in the Q&A portion of the meeting this afternoon, potentially about 4.0. I find it very confusing. I think we are going to transition to 4.0. However, I'm not even sure exactly how many of the data elements we're going to try to answer. I'm kind of curious about whether people are going to score in parallel 3.1 and 4.0 at the same time for a period of time and then transition off to 4.0. I think there are some very good things about 4.0. We can be kind of more accurate, but the scores are very different from one another. And how are we going to explain that difference in scores to the consumers of the scores? A lot of people in the 3.1 era took CVSS scores sort of as gospel. And so I'm wondering how, as an industry, we're going to smoothly transition to 4.0, which is quite different. So anyway, think about that. Take your poll. Be ready to talk about it this afternoon during the panel discussion. I think it's important for us to figure it out. And maybe some of you have already made the transition and you're already on your way, but I'm curious as to how people are finding it. So CPE is very challenging. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've done at Microsoft and MSRC. So over the years, people have asked me, not everybody, but people have said, why doesn't Microsoft put out CPE? We need this machine readable data. And I guess enough people asked me about it that I started looking into it seriously. And so I started working with Chris Turner at NVD. And I said, hey, Chris, should we start assigning CPEs? And he said, well, maybe. And I said, should we put the Windows build number in the Windows CPEs? Would that be more useful? And we decided that probably it might be more useful. And so it wasn't an easy thing, but for the 1,000 or so products that we have in the Security Update Guide, which is our online CVE display tool, I added there's a database, of course, behind it, and there's a reported software structure as table, basically. And so I added an attribute into that table called CPE, and for every product that we had, I added a CPE value. And for the Windows one, I added a little variable in the string so that I could fill in when we generated the JSON to send to RSUS, I could fill in the build number. And Chris Turner and I at NVD sent spreadsheets back and forth. We talked about it, about how to go about it. I wasn't thinking so much that I wasn't aware, actually, that NVD had changed the CPE data structure to add a couple more fields. I was just adding a very simple CPE string. And I would go out and look at previous CVEs on NVD's site to look at what string they used. And then basically I copied it over into mine. And, that took a long time for 1,000 products and doing in my spare time. I did a lot of it over a Christmas break last year. And but I eventually got them all entered, and they all had 12 colons apiece. And so we started in January this year to send those off to CVE.org. And so, and when I saw Chris Turner at MoldCon last year in North Carolina, he said it's been very useful, but we didn't actually have enough time to talk about the details about why it was very useful. But we are sending 100% CPEs to CVE.org. Shortly thereafter, Art Mannion started looking at all the CPEs, all the CNAs that were adding CPEs, and he noticed that we were all using the standard slightly different. And we realized that that was probably not good, that we should figure out how to all do it in the same way. So Red Hat in particular was doing it very opposite than Microsoft was doing it. And so then we started talking about it in the quality working group. And there were lots of ideas about how to change it. And basically, as MZ and Chris Coffin told you yesterday, we decided to go with the structure that NVD uses, which changes things a little bit. I've done some research. I haven't totally got my arms wrapped around it, but I think that we can pretty easily change our call to ARSUS to include this information. Because basically it just includes whether the CPE is affected or not affected. Some people my CPEs were always the ones indicating what was fixed. And NVD and Red Hat was saying what was affected. And so you can, with the change that we made to the schema that's going to go into effect hopefully later this year, you can kind of indicate in your CPE whether you're talking about affected or not affected. And so that's going to hopefully greatly alleviate this situation, and people will be able to understand it, and we can all kind of get on the same CPE page. Because I mentioned earlier, CPE is in the pledge, the Secure by Design pledge. And so I think as an industry, we want to do this, but we also want to do it so it's an effective way, a useful way, a machine readable way that people can understand what we're talking about. Because obviously we need to say what's affected and what's not affected. So that's coming. We're hopefully going to, I know that Microsoft will do the work to adopt it, and hopefully we'll all get on the same page and offer a lot of education so that everybody can start using it. It is a journey, though. It was not easy. So the other thing that we've been doing this year is because the rules changed, and I was on that committee. I attend most of the SPWG meetings, though not all of them, but a lot of them. I was very aware, and I was supportive of changing the rule to say you can issue a CVE that doesn't involve customer action to resolve. And it's probably a good idea because there was a lot of regulators out there in the world that were saying, hey, it's not fair that you big cloud providers hide all these vulnerabilities just because there's no action needed to resolve. How do you know there's no action? I mean, maybe the action is we want to study the vulnerabilities in clouds that are being fixed along the way. That's the action. I want to study it. I want, these vulnerabilities to be assigned CVEs and to be discussed. And I want to know whether you have any or not, because obviously, your cloud products have vulnerabilities. All software has vulnerabilities. And so there was a lot of people out there that really, really wanted us to take this step. And so this year, starting in June, we started in a limited way assigning CVEs and publishing CVEs for vulnerabilities in the cloud that don't cause customer action. We started, we have our own basically bug bar where we define what is critical and important and moderate and low. We publish those bug bars publicly for different types of technology. So the Windows one is the one that most people know, but there's an online services bug bar now. And so we have our own definition of what critical means, and that's where we're starting. We're publishing CVEs that are critical, regardless of whether there's customer action involved to resolve. And thankfully, there's not a ton of those right now. I think to date we've published 17 different CVEs that fit this category. We are trying to make them fairly simple, but we do still publish CWE, CVSS, and CPE, and title and that sort of thing for all those CVEs. We don't go into explaining why we scored it in the way we score it. We're pretty good at scoring now, so I don't feel such a big need to explain in every case. And once we move on to lower level severity CVEs, there's probably going to be more that we're going to do. So we want to have these automated as much as possible. We're already, at 100 CVEs per month, and this will certainly raise the level to more CVEs. And so in order to keep it sustainable and make it possible for us to keep publishing these CVEs, we want them to be as automated as we can make them. And so that's why we started in this crawl, walk, run way, because I wanted to figure out what best way to automate them, how they need to look, getting the feedback from our customers, and then starting to publish them. And really, I think the message here is that this is a good thing for our industry. Transparency is very important to us. I think the more transparency we can give our customer as an industry, the better off we're going to be. And so we're starting in this way, but I do encourage other cloud providers and other service providers to think about doing this. If I look at the database in general, the CVE.org database, there is not many other CNAs that are using this exclusively hosted service tag, which is the tag that we use. Art talked about this yesterday, to indicate that it's a no action. We call them no action CVEs, but that's the indication that this is a cloud only CVE. So I did see the 17 that. Shoot, now my light's off again.
Hey, Lisa, while you're doing that, I think we have a hand up from Pete, unless I'm misreading the screen here.
Okay, I can't see the chat at all, so.
That's okay. There's a couple questions, so if this is a good time, I might pause you.
In fact, this is a perfect time because I'm out of charts. So let's go to Q&A now.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, Pete, did you have your hand up or no? Maybe not. Okay. So first thing, there's a question, Lisa, in the Q&A. Are Microsoft generated CPEs being emailed to NVD for possible inclusion in their official CPE dictionary?
Let me stop sharing. Good. Phew. That my shared screen was blinking off and on the whole time, so it was driving me crazy. They get them. NVD gets them because of we put them in the CVE.org database, and so NVD gets them. And then I don't know exactly what they do with them, but Chris, I believe that Chris enters them in the dictionary, and I believe that that's why Chris said that it was useful that we were doing this, because it made his job easier.
Great. And then we have another question here that says, would an example of this be a CI/CD pipeline vulnerability, such as an issue with GitHub Actions? It doesn't require any action from the customer, and it doesn't impact the actual packaged product.
I don't think that that's exactly equivalent, because some of our products in Azure or in cloud, in those type of products are totally maintained on our side. So we don't put that package out on GitHub. We don't. The code is not public. It's in our own space, and so we just fix it. There's no action. Nobody can do anything about it. So I don't think it's equivalent, but it's similar, I would say. Did that make sense?
I think so. We do also have the poll results. I don't know if you can see those, Lisa, but we have 47% of our attendees, 27 of 58, at least at the time of the polls, who responded, I should say, used 3.1, although now it's changing again. I guess people are realizing 4.0 is only about 9%, and both is 45.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And then we also had a comment come through that looking at the larger ecosystem, CVE records over the past year, we had 2,310 with CVSS 4.0 from 90 CNAs versus 52,447 with CVSS 3.1. That was from 290 CNAs. And then we had 1,744 with both. So it's a mix. We did have a follow-up on the previous question. The clarification is that in our case, the code is open source and anyone can view the pipeline. The vols have been reported by researchers.
Okay.
All right. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat as far as questions. We have Art typing into the Q&A to provide an answer.
Oh, Joshua has a question. He's raised his hand.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm just catching up on these hand raised things. So yeah, let's go in order. So Joshua, over to you. We can't hear you, Joshua. You might be on mute.
Let me ask our support person, Tom, does somebody who's not yet a panelist but has their hand up and wants to talk, do you need to enable them somehow?
Yes, they should be able to unmute now, George.
Joshua Smith.
Yeah, George is second up, but if we can't get Joshua yet, stand by, Joshua, and we'll go to George first. So, George, you should have permission to talk, but you are muted currently.
Josh is unmuted now as well.
Oh, all right.
I was like,
We're figuring it out as we go. Joshua, over to you.
I don't think I have control over that. I think the the system does the webinar feel. I'm assuming you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
I said question/statement because on CPEs specifically, we have a very similar problem as a lot of other people. I won't re-enumerate them. And one thing I was hoping was and this is not my original idea. This came from way back when we were talking about user registry long time ago, was that the registry would also have, the CNAs in it, the organizations, kind of like the JSON data list does right now. And that in there, a CNA could dictate/control their information. Like, for example, here are our CPEs officially, or at least here are our product names officially, so that they could be correctly converted into CPEs. I wonder if anyone, I feel like it'd be great if there was some system of ownership for the CNA, and then there's always going to be, of course, vendors and products that aren't CNAs and products that, don't really have a place, and we're always going to have to create some on our own and wing it a little. But I would love to just go, which of Microsoft's CVEs is the right one or the most accurate one for the thing I'm doing, or anybody else, of course. And I was just wondering if anyone had similar thoughts on that.
Well, one thing I'll say is that prior to making the final decision to move to the MVD structure of CPEs, to change our schema to support the way NVD does it, we had a meeting with Chris Turner and other people at NVD to discuss. And we said, hey, guys, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? And they said, oh, good. I'm glad you're finally talking to us. And yes, we want you to go this way. And so NVD, the folks there are very encouraged that we're making this move. And I think it sets up a way that we can work together to discuss the library maintenance. And I think that obviously, because the CVE program has gotten far more successful since we decided to really work on federating, that NVD should be open to that kind of community participation, because I think we're all going to be much more successful by federating even the work for the CPE library, as opposed to just having, either different libraries in different places or one group of people trying to maintain it for the whole world. So I think it's a direction that we want to go, and I think we're masters of that direction. We can make it happen. And so,
yeah, quite frankly, I don't see it being feasible for any one entity to maintain those. There's just too many products, variants, too many everything.
Yeah, it's a good point. So next up, we had a hand up, although it's down now. I just wanted to confirm, George, do you still have a question or comment?
Well, I had asked about CVE 2024 46695, and I chose that one pretty much arbitrarily. And I noted that the version on CVE.org did not include CPEs. And I wonder if it is complete or if these evolve over time, because it kind of affects how one might monitor for changes in vulnerabilities.
what was the number?
It's 2024 46695. I think it's a Linux kernel one, if I remember correctly. And it describes the vulnerable range in terms of the product name and version numbers, and I think also builds. But it doesn't include CPE strings.
Yeah, I think, Chris, do you want to answer this too? Because I think there's been answers, or at least discussion on this in the chat, and I see your hand up. Is that a separate issue, Chris?
No. I was going to answer this if I got a chance.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I looked up both of those, George, and I think what it helps to understand the process flow, and this sort of reinforces what we talked about yesterday. So the CVE in question is from the kernel.org CNA. They provided all the information that's available on CVE.org. Once it shows up in the CVE corpus, then the NVD team will take that data and they will I guess traditionally they've analyzed everything, not all the time though, but in this particular case, they analyzed that CVE record and they added additional information. They enriched it. So they included the CPE data. So what you're seeing is that the NVD provided CPEs, but the original CNA did not. So this is what we were talking about yesterday, which is that using the NVD versus CVE.org can give you differing data depending on the situation and who provided what. In this case, you got more data from NVD. There was another case I think we pointed out yesterday where there was additional data on CVE.org. So really at this point, I think we're moving in a direction of providing the most amount of information and the information that comes from the CNAs on CVE.org. But you may have to use both, is what it is kind of boiling down to in what you're noticing. Does that help, George?
So what I'm here. Yes, it does. I think the message here is that you're encouraging CNAs to please insert those if they're available.
Yes. Yep. And those will appear on CVE.org, and you'll get additional data on CVE.org that you might not get on the NVD site. But there are cases of the other way around where NVD is providing additional data.
Yeah, we can't probably speak very well for the NVD's current state, but they are doing this, just not at the same clip as they used to, right? And there's a backlog of this kind of activity. So,
yep.
If you don't mind, this is Ken. I just want to make a couple points. One of the things that is, at least from my perspective, very important to understand is that the CPEs coming from vendors are much more authoritative than what comes out of the dictionary. The dictionary is there for the fact that NVD is required to support it and needs to have that information because of products that run within the U.S. federal government's environments. But if they have information coming from the vendors themselves, here are our official product names. Here are our CPEs for these that are vulnerable. This is really the best place to get that information. The NVD has to construct it from various places, gather it, decide what is real and what's not real, and try to minimize this into their format and their usage. I think in a lot of respects, if we're not as vendors actually contributing our official names, then we get what we give. We're not going to be getting really good naming if we're not giving the world what we consider to be our official names. So this is an evolving area of software identification and vulnerable systems, but you're going to have to be able to figure out what those names are. And the right way to do that is if the CNAs, if we give that information to the assignment information we put in the CVE records, so that we can, in fact, put the as from the vendor information out. And that's where the difference lies between, in a lot of respects, between the CVE.org and the NVD, is that we're getting this information directly from those who own the products and are the ones most affected. And the NVD is calculating, configuring, and collating and trying to put things in the right place. But reality is, we are the source and should be the source. And if we're not, then woe is us. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Ken. Lisa, we have another question in the Q&A for you, specifically to the no action CVE records. Can you speak a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of how customers are reacting to those that don't require action? So are they confused? Are they appreciative of the transparency? Do you have any data points on that?
For the most part, I can say I have gotten no negative response that I've heard to the no action CVEs, except the fact that maybe we should add more information than what we're adding. And there have been a lot of folks that have said, yeah, we really support this. We really think that you need to amplify it and convince all cloud providers to do it. And so for the most part, it's just been very, very positive. We do label the CVEs in various ways. In the security update guide, there's a column that shows it's a no action CVE. In the API, you can filter them out. We use the exclusively hosted service tag so that hopefully people can understand, that it is a no action. There's kind of a big, bolded line on the CVE detail page saying this requires no action to resolve. Don't worry about it. So we try to make it obvious, but so far we've got no negative feedback.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. There is some chat going on in the webinar chat. We have a question that's just popped in further on the CPE and MVD dictionary question. I'll just read it out loud maybe, and whoever would like to answer it can. The NVD product CPE link says that an email to the CPE dictionary at NIST.gov is the official mechanism for adding NIST's official CPE dictionary. Is anybody doing this? Who's doing this? And what's the feedback been like?
I know that we haven't done it. We haven't reached out in that way in that method.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any hands, so feel free to type an answer or call in. Joshua, the email is in the webinar chat. I will just read it out loud. It is CPE_dictionary@NIST.gov. That is what they say is the official mechanism for adding to the CPE dictionary. Can't say anything about the timing to do it, but yes, please do type questions and answers in the chat box if possible. I will echo one point since we don't have a question, and I think it's quite important, and it's sort of echoing what Kent was saying before. While we have this audience that is really the experts in their own vulnerability scope as a CNA, you are the authoritative supplier, right, of this information. If you provide CPE and other enrichment information like CVSS and CWE, there really isn't a need for others to duplicate that work at scale. I know that historically that has been done by downstream consumers, but now there is this opportunity where the CVE program, has enabled through evolution of its data format to be able to handle this and include it in a neat kind of way on the website. When it's rendered, it's up there first and foremost. So I'll just echo that again while we track other questions. Wondering, it looks like Pete is putting in a question for everybody. NVD rescores used to take about a 10-day turnaround, or rather a 10-day response time. Is that still the case for folks? Are people seeing that, hearing that? I have no idea. Excuse me, I'm just laughing at the idea of that single point of failure email scaling. Yes. This is a question probably for the program, and maybe we can answer this in the background. I'm thinking out loud here. Simon from the Q&A asks, are there any stats overall on the number of cloud-only CVEs that have been published and how many CNAs have published such records? I'm just saying that again for the background. If we can calculate that, I'd be curious. I think there's one way we could do it, maybe with the tags. I don't know, but go ahead, Lisa.
When I looked the other day, there was 18 CVEs that had that tag. 17 were from Microsoft, and one was from a cloud provider in China.
Okay. Yeah, I think part of it is how we'd actually search for that. I know there might be more, but people aren't doing it in a uniform way. If we get that tag being used, yeah.
I encourage everybody to go to test.cve.org and try out the new search capability. It's pretty cool. And I found those 18 records with that search tool. One thing that the exclusively hosted service tag has underscores in it, and the new searching tool doesn't take underscores. It only takes dashes, and only if it's embedded in a CVE ID. Otherwise, there's no special characters. But I typed exclusively, and it pulled up those 18 records that had that tag. So you didn't have to type in the entire tag to find it.
All right. Well, we are pretty close to our time to stop this good discussion, but we do have a moment. So if you do have a question you haven't had a chance to ask, this is the time. We're going to be pivoting here in a moment to our next topic. So while we have...
Is there any reporting mechanism for defects? I think it's just emailing the...
Yes, no, there is. Sorry, I'm just seeing Todd's message. Yeah, there is actually. Dave, Secretariat team, can we put a link to the feedback form for the test site in the chat, please? Stand by for that.
Isn't it page related?
It should be right in there. Yeah, right in. It should be right in there in the at the header. I think even I can't think offhand, but it should be.
I think it's at the bottom of the page that gets generated, and there's a link on a per page basis, or at least that was the intent. So it should be showing up there on each of the pages. So if you have feedback, you can scroll to the bottom and then provide feedback if you're not seeing what you need to see the right way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I was correct, actually. If you go to the test.cve.org page, you'll notice at the very top there is a yellow tone box that says the CVE test website has a new drop-down menu below. If you expand that, within that first, there's a little bit of information just so you know what it is and all that kind of stuff. In that first item, number 1, there's a provide feedback on the new search capability link. This will take you to the form that I mentioned, and that would be preferred versus using the broader sort of feedback page. So again, go to the page. It's at the top in the yellow tone box. It says the CVE test website has a new drop down menu below, click the plus sign, and you will read some valuable information. And then number 1 at the end has a link to provide feedback on the new search capability.